Yep, that's working.
Can you see it okay, Danelle?
Yep, we can see it.
Got it. Perfect. Whoops. Took me right off of there again. Hold on a second. Okay, here we go. Okay, guys. Hello from Orlando, Florida. I'm on the road a little bit. My vacation got extended a bit after we had this all planned, so I figured I could work it out from the beach. So anyway, I'm still a little bit in vacation mode, but happy to be here, and special welcome to Samaritan. Thank you for joining us. This is our way to continue to provide support and kind of community for folks learning CBTP. And we also added the family component, which I'll talk a little bit about here as I go through my presentation. So today is a little bit of review and update. What's that saying? Something old, something new, something borrowed. That's wedding stuff. But anyway, it's a little bit of old stuff, a little bit of new stuff. So the first slide is essentially an overview of CBTP stuff, which you guys are all familiar with, the essential features. This is adapted from Kate Hardy's kind of fact sheet, and the link is there below. So if you ever need like a brief sort of fact sheet to look at for CBT stuff, it's a really good one. Just a review of the essential components: therapeutic alliance, action-oriented skills, formulation, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and structure. As I was reflecting on this, I was reminded of a story from Ellen Sachs, who is a famous attorney, really, and also someone with lived experience of psychosis. Some of you have probably seen her talks. She has a book, The Center Cannot Hold, which talks about her experience of psychosis and her ability to recover from that. But reflecting on therapeutic alliance, she talks about her early experience in college, where she began to experience psychosis and started to unravel a bit and felt very scary. And she had a friend that just sort of was very kind and gentle, kind of guiding her. And she talked about how important that was. And it reminded me of the befriending stuff we talk about with CBT, that we always begin with that therapeutic alliance of really just being available in a non-threatening, very kind, just available kind of way. And she likened it to being, when she was in that state, she said it was like being lost in a forest where you don't really know where you're at, and it's very scary. And all of a sudden, someone comes along, a friendly guide, who just gently kind of shows you the way to kind of get out of the forest. And that's what it was like for her in her psychosis, when somebody approached her in a very kind and non-threatening, kind of befriending way, just getting to know her and how important that was. So we have a lot of strategies and skills and techniques, but it always begins with that therapeutic relationship. Let's see if I can move on to the next slide. Okay, there we go. All right, so the next piece is really just about the structure of CBT. I'm not going to spend too much time here. Hopefully everyone's very familiar with the START model. We begin with that relational-based kinds of things, identify some sort of target and agenda, use some CBT strategies. And then I'm going to focus here also on the review and the take-home work, how important it is to, whenever we work with individuals we're working with, when we're wrapping up sessions, just to kind of review what was helpful today, what stood out to you today, to kind of get that sense of what stuck, if you will, what was important to that person, both as a measure of the progress of therapy, but also just including the individual in their experience of it and how they can move forward. I hope I'm coming across okay, because my internet's a little unstable. So the next is formulation. This is an important part of the CBT approach. This is the CBT model, as we're all familiar with. Situation leads to certain thoughts, appraisals, emotions, and then behaviors, and early history, of course, feeds into this. One of the things that we have tried to do with this particular echo is to add the family dimension to the whole thing. And it can be family in the traditional sense, but it can also be supporters in a much broader, inclusive kind of sense. And really the idea that often when we think about CBT, we think about the individual. And at the same time, we want to help folks think about the context, the family that's involved, both how the family influences and friends influence the person's experience, and how the person's illness can influence the family system. And so keeping those things in mind is part of our process. So this is just an example of a typical CBT formulation, a simple formulation where a certain situation may activate an unusual experience. A person may be alone at home and they begin to hear voices. They may believe that those voices are threat and danger, and they may be all-powerful beings that are affecting them. There's distress that follows that. Often there's avoidance and reassurance seeking that can happen as part of that. which can often look like a person just isolating at home or doing strange behaviors to try to deal with the voices, which may lead to some short-term reduction in distress, but over time it tends to intensify. And then you can see in the green a widening of our understanding of like what is the home environment that may be contributing to the activation of the symptoms, the beliefs that come about in response to the voices in this case, is there family and cultural beliefs that may influence the interpretation of how the person experiences that event. And then in terms of the behaviors that follow the way a person responds to hearing voices or paranoia, what is the family system response to this? Person I'm working with right now has fears the family are going to be killed, so calls the family a lot. And so the family is affected both in receiving lots of calls, but also kind of reinforcing that safety behavior. So it's really important to talk with the family as well as the person I'm working with to kind of help manage some of that behavior, because the safety behavior will continue to exacerbate the symptoms over time. So just a kind of review of how important the formulation is and to include the family as part of that formulation. And this leads to the goals for this CBT and family system echo. One is to reinforce and expand our CBT skills and strategies. And that's through case presentation that Amy's going to do a little bit later. And lots of us here can contribute to thoughts and ideas, and also expand our knowledge and skills for including and working with family and loved ones in the CBT framework. Because we know that when families involved in interventions, we tend to get better outcomes, typically is what the research shows. Okay, so that's kind of the review of the background stuff. I want to move on to updates from the field. And there are a number of things going on, and I'll just give a little preface for this. I picked 3 themes that came from a conference that Val and I went to in San Francisco. It's called Beckfest, and it's a gathering of CBTP researchers, a lot of folks from the United Kingdom, but also from Italy, Australia, Germany, a bunch of different places. And there were 3 that kind of jumped out. There's a bunch of stuff that was really cool and interesting, but related to what we do here, I wanted to kind of point out 3 areas, and I'm just going to go over it briefly, and then we can dig into it. If you are interested in any of these or all of these, we can make these topics later on for us to dig into in more detail. So the first one I called culturally adapted approaches for CBT or resources for psychosis. What this is, it comes from the I2 trial, and what is that is the early youth engagement and first episode psychosis trial. And this came out of the UK. And the reason this trial was initiated was as they were looking at their early intervention for psychosis programs, they were finding that there was fairly high levels of disengagement for the early intervention services, anywhere between 25 and 30%. So as they dug into that a little bit, they realized they needed to do more to engage individuals who experience psychosis, particularly youth. And so what they developed was a team-based motivational engagement intervention. So it's a lot of MI, a lot of open communication, a lot of those kind of strategies, supported by, and this is why I included this here, training and resource information. So the link that's available that you'll get in your slide deck from the Like Mind, it's part of the National Health System in the UK, has a tremendous amount of resources for service users, for clinicians, for family members. Just amazing. Just came out in May as they're releasing this trial. So they kind of held back the stuff from the, just kind of wider public. But they presented on this in May and said that the resources are available and it's worth a look. A lot of it is very UK focused. So there's a lot of resources specifically in, for England and UK. But they also have booklets in multiple languages, I think 11 or 12 languages. They have family booklets, service user booklets, clinician resources. The dialogue measure that we've provided in training as a little assessment tool to see how folks are doing, that's available in multiple languages. And there's some good family-friendly information booklets there too. And I found information on Asperger's. I found stuff on a whole bunch of different topics. So it's worth a look to get some ideas and adapted resources there. A lot of cool stuff there. So that's really, and Kathy Greenwood, who was at the conference, they have training in this kind of stuff. If there's something that you're very specifically interested, let me know and I can certainly help you connect to those resources. So that was one of the updates, really more for early intervention, but does have some of this cultural adaptation piece added to it. So I'd encourage you to take a look there. Next one. There we go. The next one is something called Psychosis Reach. And REACH stands for Recovery by Enabling Adult Carers at Home. And the basic idea for this is to train family members in some CBT informed strategies. So for those of you who are familiar with Javier Amador and his LEAP model, he has some strategies that he teaches there as part of helping family members and caregivers have some skills to work with family members. This is a slightly different variation that teaches family members some CBT informed strategies like normalization, some befriending kind of strategies, some simple coping ideas, things like that. And so the idea is they provide training for family members directly in stuff on the recovery model, how to take care of oneself as a caregiver, and then some CBT informed skills. You'll see they call them FIRST skills, which aren't too different from our START model, but FIRST stands for falling back on the relationship, inquiring in a curious way, reviewing information, skill building, and trying out the skills. So they have some training that helps family members develop some ways to work with their loved one, hopefully more effectively. And they have self-paced e-training, life skills workshops, family peer coaching, family ambassadors, that kind of thing. Currently, Danelle and I are in conversations with Sarah Kapelovich in University of Washington, who has partially developed this model. The model, Doug Turkington and his colleagues in the UK developed it, and they're trying to bring it to the United States. So we're looking into this as something potentially that we can do through the Best Center and maybe through one of your agencies. We don't know. Outcomes, caregivers tend to report reduction in negative caregiving appraisals, reduced expressed emotion, reduction in some measures of caregiver distress. Attitudes about psychosis tend to be improved. They self-report better skills. Now, they don't have a good measure of, they don't do fidelity reviews in terms of how well they're using the skills, but family members feel more confident about what they're doing. There are limitations. They don't have randomized control trials with this stuff yet, and they're not at this point looking at treatment effects for the loved one with an illness, but it empowers the family member. So it's something I thought might be interesting for us to at least think about, for you guys to have some exposure to, and the references are in the reference section. Okay. The third and last of the things there, like I said, there are plenty of things there, but this one really stood out at the conference. Virtual reality therapy, these tech innovations. So Dan Freeman, their group out of Oxford, presented on something called Game Change. And this is a virtual reality based therapy that's rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy principles. And the link that is there will take you to their main site, and you can see their little advertisement, but also their research articles that go with it. But essentially it is, and I have a little picture that has virtual reality, and it kind of looks like that. It's got the eye gear and then some hand gears. I thought it looked kind of like a Wii, if you guys had any of those Wii operating systems. But the idea is that their CBT formulation is that a lot of the isolation that happens in psychosis is not that much different from agoraphobic related avoidance. And so they have a measure that they use that measures threat cognitions and then how much avoidance they do in situations to get a sense of where it's at. And what they found was folks with psychosis, the two top threat cognitions were, I'm going to be judged negatively and I will panic if I'm out in public. There's a number of other threat cognitions that go with that. But what they essentially do with the virtual therapy is, they wear the gear, and there's a kind of an avatar that walks them through the steps. The name is Nick. And she kind of walks them through different experiences, mostly related to getting people out of the house. So this was really targeted for individuals that had the kind of psychosis that really kept them in their homes. And so walk them in virtual space in little steps towards getting outside of the house, opening the door, going down the street, going to the store. So a little bit of exposure. It also is packaged and it's supported by either peers or mental health providers, kind of are also part of this treatment intervention. So they have the gear, and then they also have a mental health provider that helps them walk through the steps. And the idea is to expose them in small steps to things that they're afraid of, and then challenge the threat cognitions while they're doing that. And what they found was that for those who were the most severely affected or had the most severe agoraphobic avoidance, had the largest effect size, to the extent that individuals who were pretty much isolated on average were able to complete 2 or more activities outside of the home at 26 weeks. All right. So the exposure helped them. They brought the equipment right to their home. They did the interventions at home, and they even kept the gear there for part of the time at their homes. And with that intervention, we're able to kind of progressively get out of the house more and more. So anyway, an interesting use of technology and cognitive behavioral principles to kind of help folks get out of their homes. All right, so there's that piece. And again, I don't have enough time to go into a lot of detail. All right, so that's really the three main things that I wanted to touch base on. And I want you to think about, and you can put it in the chat box or just ask a question if there's any of these you want more information about or a future topic. I'm also going to put out a information about the North America CBT for Psychosis Network. I know a couple of folks in our group here belong to the NACBTP. And what this is a network of individuals in North America who are looking to improve the quality of CBTP for psychosis in North America. The website has a number of resources, listings of trainings, things like that. And we've been hosting office hours once a month. And so individuals have been able to kind of call in or Zoom in and talk to someone from the network. I'm part of the network Valis as well. And so this is something to consider. It's fairly low cost, and you do get a little bit of belong to a larger network that way. So I just want to put that out there as an additional outlet for support and resources as it relates to CBT for psychosis. So I think with that, I will pause